It is the 10th of June, 2019. It's been 28 years, 11 months, and 16 days since I masturbated or had an affair. Relationships now, that's what we're dealing with. And they start to sound like this. Really pretty stuff, that last relationship. When that relationship ended, I went to a chastity period. It was my third chastity period. I started with 7.5 months of what we call monk mode now, or hard mode. And then got involved with Jay for 2.5 years. And in the period, in the middle of that, we spent 90 days doing, actually 4.5 months doing a chastity period because we were separated. We needed to take a little time off. But when we came back and we were together for a good while. And at the end of 2.5 years, when poise hit me so hard, I went into a chastity period. But I wasn't afraid at that point because I know I discovered the incredible power of chastity. And I was actually looking forward to it because I knew if I didn't make love to the person I loved, I could go be with God. And so I wasn't afraid. And I was a very dramatic Indian. I said, well, I'm never having sex again. And I took my bed and I literally threw it out the window of my second floor apartment building onto the ground. Because I wasn't going to have, a second bed anymore. I got a little bitty bed so that nobody could fit in. I threw my queen bed away, got a twin. So it was just an act of drama. Addicts, beneath every addiction, there's a codependent. And so I was very dramatic, very drama. So I went into a chastity period, and I went in for 19 months. It was my second longest period, and I was expecting to spend my time with God. But what happened was, my higher power said, Steve, you've developed a relationship with me, and you got that. But now it's time to develop a relationship with you. And God took a cab. He just took the last train for the coast, the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. The day the music died, he was gone. And God didn't appear in any kind of, I couldn't sense a higher power in my life for 19 months of chastity. That's when God made me man up. And I had to start looking inside myself for real. AA says, he loved me until I could learn to love myself. But there's another part that says, he makes me lie down in green pastures. God doesn't say, oh, Steve, would you like to lie down in green pastures? He doesn't do that. He said, lie down, son. And that's what he did to me. And so I had 19 months completely on my own. There was no higher power, nothing. No guidance, no intuition, no insights, no feelings, no nothing. So I learned. That's where I learned to be with Steve. And then after 19 months, I got tired of it. And I decided I wanted another relationship. And I was in the YMCA, and there was a pretty young girl there. She was actually a couple years older than me. But she was short, and she was very petite, all the things I like. And she had a son that she had had with a guy who she called the donor. She was not interested in being involved with, but she wanted a son. So she got some guy to impregnate her, and she raised the son. And the guy got to come over on Wednesday night for 2 hours. And he was out of her life. But she had gotten at that point where he was 7 years old, and it was kind of hard for her. So she wanted somebody to help share the load. And so, I was in one of my many custody cases, 5 custodies for my daughter. My daughter was with her mother. It was awful. And her name was S. We'll just call her S. And S was petite, and she was sweet. And I hadn't had sex in 19 months. And I still hadn't masturbated. It was years I had masturbated at this point. Probably been 5 years of no fap. And I got to tell you, man, that's really important. Not doing that fapping is the energy that drives you to be with a partner. If I'm masturbating, I've got no drive to do that. But if I don't masturbate, it pushes me as a male toward a female. And so I wanted one. I knew how to be without one for 19 months. And Susan, S and I got involved, and it was lovely. Now there's some silliness about this particular thing. There's some craziness about this. I was so involved, and I feel embarrassed about this. I was so happy with my chastity that I didn't want to give it up. So S and I were having all kinds of sexuality, except I wasn't being orgasmic. And this is where the lies come in sex addiction. And I was saying to myself I was being chased, even though I was being as orally and penile-vaginally vigorous as I could possibly be with her. But I was lying to myself and therefore to others that I was still being chased because I wasn't being orgasmic. And then finally one day, S was saying, her stomach was hurting. She said, well, you might be pregnant. Why don't you go to the doc in the box and see? And she was driving out the road. I looked out the window and I thought, Steve, if she's pregnant, you're going to have a hard time telling the boys at the S meetings that you haven't been having sex. And that broke my denial. And I realized I had been having sex. But even in my foolishness, and that went on for like 4.5 months before I was orgasmic. But here was the good news. And this would pay off dividends the rest of my life, which just goes to show God can make crooked lines into straight lines. I learned to have sex for as much as 6 hours at a time and not be orgasmic. Now, I was lying to myself, but I was learning a skill that would pay real dividends later on, because most guys in America are orgasmic upon penetration under 3 minutes. Now, I gotta tell you, if you're a female, that's not very satisfying. And I can do it for as much as, I've done it for 11 hours before. Okay? But I learned that from S, being with S, and lying to myself. But I learned how to have sex in extended periods. And I got news for you, that's very satisfying to a partner. That's very satisfying to a woman who can just relax and say, you know, I don't have to worry about this. This guy is going to meet my needs to be orgasmic, and I can relax. He's not going to freak out and be pre-orgasmic. That's not going to happen. He's not going to be prematurely ejaculatory. That's a wonderful, wonderful skill set, and I learned it with this woman. I was with her, S, for 8 months, and then it suddenly ended one day, just out of the blue. A woman walked into a meeting, a red-headed woman, who, with white skin and large breasts, and she was the smartest, most articulate woman I would ever meet in my life. And she was in touch with her feelings and was gifted spiritually. And I just fell in love with her that moment, just that moment. She walked into a meeting, a Debtors Anonymous meeting is where I first saw her. And I went home that night and said, Susan, I've got to stop. And that was the end of the relationship. I just told her right away because I knew I had to stop. And that was the end of that relationship. The good news is I announced my limits. I said I can't go, and I didn't betray her. I told her the truth. I've got to stop. She was very hurt, but she was glad I was honest with her, because I was the first man in her life who had ever been honest with her. One last story about her. I remember one time we were making love, and I looked over the side of the bed, and I looked over at her shoes, and every one of them was a pair of boots, every single one. And I looked over and said, "Are you lesbian?" She said, I said, "Do you see a problem with that?" She said, so we just kept right on going. So I appreciate the accommodation that S made for me in her life. And if you're out there, S, I'm sorry that I was hurtful to you, but I'm glad that we were together, and I'm glad that I told you the truth.